on one of the very important developments across the region. And of course, a few weeks ago, the floor of Uganda's parliament witnessed chaotic scenes as legislators debated a motion around presidential age limits. Members of parliament were seen engaging in fist fights with the hurling of chairs between those in support and those against age limit debate. And of course, these are the images that are showing on your screen. This is what happened in Uganda's parliament. Meanwhile, in Kenya, with just about 3 days to the October 26th repeat presidential polls, opposition leader Raila Odinga has said he will, on October 25th, issue a statement giving his supporters the way forward concerning the repeat presidential election. Raila has reiterated that there will be no election on Thursday, adding that Kenyans of goodwill must desist from participating in the elections. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has, however, warned that any person threatening to disrupt the presidential repeat polls will be dealt with according to the law. Kenyatta has said that enough police officers have been deployed in every corner of the country to protect those who are willing to vote. Tonight on the program, our focus is on election processes in the region and, of course, conflict resolution mechanisms around electoral related conflicts. Let me introduce my panelists on the program. We have none other than Dr. Frank Habineza, who's not new in the program, but of course for the first time since the presidential elections here in Rwanda. Thank you for joining us again on the program.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Also with us is retired Major Alfred Ndawarasa, who is a peace and security expert. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And with us is Jean de Dieu Gakuba, loves calling himself J.D. Gakuba, who's an educationist. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
In the goodness of time, hoping that the technical issue will be sorted out, we're expecting to have Nerima Wako, who's an executive director of Siasa Place. She'll be joining us all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. So if that happens, we'll be told about that from the technical team. But you saw from the intro that I just made concerning what is happening in the region, Kenya, Uganda, of course DRC, when it comes to elections, not sure whether they'll have it this year or it will be in 2019 as what we've seen out there. And I want us to just take a few minutes and talk about what our thoughts are on these developments across the region. I'll start with you, Dr. Habineza.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Well, maybe we start with Uganda. I think what we saw in the parliament was very unfortunate for the honorables to be fighting in the Gas House. I think that was not very good, but we understand that they had serious issues. But I think maybe they would have found peaceful mechanism to solve those, a better than fighting, because I think that gave a very bad lesson for especially the younger ones and even those who wish to go to the parliament. So I think it's not good for the younger generation who wish to become parliamentarians when they see that. But we understand their problems, and I wish they could find another way of solving those problems.
Let's start first with Uganda, around with everybody else, and then we'll go to Kenya. Your thoughts, Dr. Ndawarasa, retired Major. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. What is happening in the region is a big lesson to all of us. This is a region that has experienced a lot of political violence all around us. This is a transition. I want everybody to know that democracy is messy. So these are strong lessons that we should all take into account. It's a transition from violence, political violence that we've experienced. This is also some bit of violence, but it's not as bad as it was a few years ago.
So you're saying democracy is messy. So for those who are worried and feeling like there's cause for alarm, they should just sit back and chill, because this is normal. It's part of the process of...
It's a process. For these young democracies, it will be tough. It will be difficult. These are pains of democracy. So give it time. We are going to grow into it, and we are going to overcome these issues.
Right. We're going to grow it, and we're going to overcome it. JD, Dr. Habineza says this is a bad precedent that we are setting for the young generation that would love to join parliament. In the case of Uganda, he says that this is actually, democracy is messy, and it's part of the process of growing into, stronger circumstances. I want to hear your thoughts, first of all, as a young person, and secondly, from your point of view, where you sit as an educationist.
Well, first, thank you for having me here as a voice for the youth. Well, when I look at what is happening, the developments that lately in Uganda, I even see it beyond just the age limit. It is signaling a new era on this part of the world. And it's coming back to the real definitions of democracy. It's about the people. Because the Ugandans are looking back and saying, well, we have had this. Of course, there's been this economic growth, but when it comes to the youth, they will say, how inclusive was that economic growth? And they want to go back and look at programs such as Operation Wealth Creation, and say, if there's wealth creation in Uganda, where is wealth distribution? And where is the involvement, the participation of the youth? Questions from the youth are around that, participation and involvement, and them feeling empowered and given the right place in deciding their future.
Right. Okay. So Dr. Awineza, for you, you say this is a bad president. So if you were part of the people solving the issue that is going on in Uganda, for instance, right now, as far as how they're handling the issue of the age limit debate, to a point where we have seen, the banning of street protests for those who have been preparing these protests and all that, what sort of mechanisms would you be advising on from where you sit as a person who's in the opposition?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I think if I was a parliamentarian in Uganda and a landfill, like most of them are landfills, I mean they are lawyers, would have sought maybe a court injunction whereby you could have prevented the parliament to meet. That would be one, so that they don't discuss that, and then we discuss issues before we go to the parliament. So I would look for outside the house discussion before you go into that. So this is part of peaceful mechanism. Two, if I had the power, again in Uganda, I would seek for the referendum to take these issues back to the people, and we call for a national referendum whereby all the people of Uganda could decide on this issue, other than deciding it only for by the members. Yes, yeah. Because I think this issue concerns...
They represent the people.
Yes, they represent the people, but this issue concerns all Ugandans. I think it's about the future of the country. And people have seen the President Museveni for the last 30 years plus. And now this is about the future, whether they need him more or they need him to go to rest. So I think all the people of Uganda are concerned. It's not only the MPs who are concerned. So I think I would advise or advocate for a national referendum whereby all Ugandans would be involved into this debate, and then they chart a way forward as a nation. Right. Not just the MPs.
So first you start with legal mechanisms. I want to hear from your point of view from an expert on peace and security matters. Yes. Some people argue and say, political issues need political solutions. Legal issues need legal solutions. And in this case, some will argue that what's going on in Uganda and even Kenya is actually a political issue. To some extent, yes, legal because of the issues of the constitution and the crisis that would occur if certain things don't happen. Do you think legal, solutions would work towards these political issues that we see today?
Look, this is a complex issue. I don't think either of the two can be applied in isolation of the other. I think we should take a wholesome approach to these issues. They are not necessarily going to be resolved legally as such. In any case, you saw what a legal outcome has developed in Kenya. It has not necessarily solved the problem. But indeed, it's a political process. Yeah. We have to grow into to mature into political processes all around us. It's not one country or the other. This is where we should be heading. But I told you this takes time. It's not Kenya, for example, had its Moi times, then it went into the Kibaki era. Now it's here. Even before Kibaki to Uhuru, there were issues. One, legal issues won't necessarily solve everything. We have to continue looking for ways to resolve our political issues. A constitution is a guiding document of how people should govern themselves. It is important. It is, that is civilization. If you can now have a document that guides you as a society to realize your future objectives for whether you are youth or for generations to come, that's the right thing to do. But the way you go about it is what is causing all the issues we have now.
So for purposes of clarity and just, setting the record straight, someone listening to you might feel that, for democracy to mature, then it is normal to undergo what we are seeing in Kenya, what we are seeing in Uganda, and several parts of the region. But I want to hear from you, from the perspective of peaceful resolutions to this, crisis. To what extent, then, should people go to have a mature democracy? Because we've seen lives lost, we've seen property destroyed, we've seen situations where people have said, I'm not going to go to that region or that particular place. So to what level, then, should we go for us to have a mature democracy?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Some countries don't have to go through what we've gone through. Others have been able to manage without as much violence. We are, our countries, especially around us, we have huge populations that are very young. That is bound to be, that's a lot of force out there that is demanding. If it's not contained, we are certainly going to end up with these challenges.
Right.
But if principles of governing people are done in an organized manner, we should avoid violence.
Violence at all costs.
We should at all costs. Violence doesn't necessarily help our economies. Indeed, we want peace and security. I wouldn't be happy anything going wrong in Kenya. That's a big economy. It has a lot of influence in the whole region. So disrupting Kenya would disrupt also many other countries around it.
Right.
So any processes that would help us realize a democratic change that is peaceful is the right thing to do. We should not, but there is reality too. So there is violence, it's going on, whether it's in Uganda or in Kenya or even in Congo. If we need to see what can be done through mechanisms that exist on the continent and within the region to resolve these issues. To
resolve the issues. And that brings us to the issue which I want JD to come in on, especially when it comes to the alternative solutions to these problems that we're already seeing today. If we can now take a few minutes and talk about what's happening in Kenya today. The country is supposed to go for a fresh presidential election on the 26th of October. You have seen and heard what the opposition leader has said, and saying that I am not going to be part of these elections. And this brings us to the issue of, will these repeat presidential elections solve whatever is going on, whatever the issues are in Kenya? JD, what's your take on that?
Well, that's a very, very serious question, because for every young man, as I've seen, and I think you're aware of these young men who convened at the AU last August, elections were part of the discussions that we had, and they were really hot discussions. What we do as a youth, we go back and say, where are we coming from, first of all? When you look at what is happening today, it is definitely an offshoot, a product of something else that has been there for all this time. And when you look back, you see during the times of colonialism, it was occupation of our land. And then after independence, it was occupation of our thinking space. Someone coming in and showing us what we should do, and some external force, you know, those interferences, showing you, putting leaders in place who are going to be their mediums. And one of the things that I really feel I need to highlight is people coming to you and saying, you know, segmenting you and saying, you are called this name and you are this percentage. They came over to run and say, you are minority and these ones are majority. And those ideologies and conceptions are really deeply flawed, and they're still guiding things here because you don't want to rally the youth, the people, the voters around your political agenda, but around who you are and your ethnic group and your clan. And those young men, you're telling them, come, I'm fighting for you and come and fight for me. And I guess it stems from there, and that's where people need to go and say, who are we? The minority and majority concepts have more economic meaning than societal meanings, because it's about the minority of the rich people and the majority of the undeveloped middle class and the poor.
Right. Okay. So you feel that is what should be the focus in solving this issue. How about you, Dr. Habineza? You are also from an election and which you did lose, of course, in Kenya. Your counterparts, as far as opposition politics is concerned, Raila Odinga says, I will not participate in these elections. Of course, this coming after the disputed, elections of 8th, where the Supreme Court did annul the results. And people were feeling like, if these elections take place, then it could be a solution to that problem that we had on the 8th. But others are saying this will not solve the real issues affecting the Kenyan people. I'd love to read your mind on what you think will be the solution to the problems of Kenyans and the problems of the political issues in Kenya today.
Yeah, I think the current elections, what we see now, the problems they have, the conflict which is there, I think if you want to look at it properly, you have to start from the independence period. And you see the independence struggle, what the key figures that were involved in the process, and what has been taking place for over the 50 years up to now. So that could help us to understand why do we have this problem in Kenya. I think if you understand very well that Raila's father was a key figure in the independence struggle with Uhuru's father. And I think you know that Raila's father played a key role to get out Uhuru's father from the prison. So you know that process. I think there's discouragement that perhaps the people from Raila's kinsmen, they have not had any share in the power since the time of independence. I'm not going to go back into the details, but the whole history, but I think that's the fact that this whole ethnic group or people, they feel they have been locked out of this process. Yeah, after Jomo Kenyatta, then President Moi, then Kibaki, and you know what happened in between with Kibaki and the violence we had. So we look into this problem from that period. So I think at this moment, what I can advise is that I don't think that this election is going to give any solution. I think that these key figures, again, now we talk about Raila and President Uhuru.
Yes.
They could, again, sit aside and discuss how they can share power equitably. Because this is the problem. Because if, let's say, Uhuru goes on and wins again, it will cause more chaos. If Raila wins, I mean, now he has pulled out. If he won still, I mean, there would be chaos. So I think the only solution is that to see how can this marginalized group, Raila's group, people, how can they take part in the national building? How can they share this national cake? This is, if they can find a solution, this will solve the problems. But elections is not a solution, because you see there's some writers called Carotas. They wrote a certain book recently, but I'm going to just quote one thing. They say that that even though elections, the new democratic paradigm says that elections are important for bringing democracy, but they are not sufficient. They are good. They can help people to share experiences, to learn, but they are not enough. So we need more than we need more than elections to have real democracy. So in case of Kenya, elections, especially these coming elections, I don't think it's a solution. The solution is for Raila's people and Uhuru's people to sit aside, see how can we share power, how can we share national resources, how can we work together, how can we build the nation. This is what is needed in Kenya.
Right. So would you still advise Raila at this stage to still boycott the elections?
I think, well, I think the stand he took...
if you had his number and called him, if you had the ability to convince him, would you tell him to be part of it?
No, I don't think so. But what I think is we can do is not going to the election. What is we can sit with Uhuru and they can find a solution how they can work together after. That's the most important. But election is not the most important.
It's not the most important thing.
No.
Tell me something, because one of the things that we know about conflict resolution, especially when it is, you know, when we have a crisis or near crisis moment, is accepting that we have a problem. That's the first step. And sadly, in most of these situations, in most cases, you'll find that the leadership at the moment always denies and says, we have no crisis. There is no problem here. I'll take a case in point. For example, in Burundi, in the early stages, you had, when everybody else was talking about Burundi, there's a problem, Burundi, there's an issue. The president there said, we have no crisis here. When it comes to in Kenya today, President Uhuru Kenyatta has said himself, we do not have a crisis. And the people of Kenya are the ones who will decide who leads them. So we have no time to call for mediation or to have anybody to come and mediate or sort the crisis that we have. I want to hear from you again on the same question, on what would be the appropriate solution mechanisms outside, you know, the violence, outside the mass action, outside the demonstrations. What would be the appropriate ways of solving the crisis or the situation we have in Kenya?
It's very difficult. The two groups are almost split in the middle. The following on either side, they are almost split. And those are the challenges of the young democracies. Here we are, those who are and NASA. The last election, it was 54, something else. 54.
It was about 1.4 margin.
Margin.
Yes.
So you already, that's a precursor for conflict if there is a contention. And there was a contention after, unfortunately. The last incident we saw in the previous elections, the UN had to intervene and other international bodies to help the situation. This will go on for a while. We should now, that's what I was talking about, maturing out of these conflicts. Elsewhere, even in the United States and other countries, once you get 54 and somebody gets 49, you accept that you've been defeated. But the 49 are a huge majority. Then you accept to go in the opposition and
concede defeat.
Concede defeat. But that doesn't mean you're not participating in the issues of your country, even when you are the 49%, because you're now in opposition, you exert pressure from that vantage point. We are not yet there, most of the countries around us. We shall need to be supported along the way through existing mechanisms. I wish, that's a wish, that countries like Kenya that have huge economy. I mean, Kenya is a country of per capita of $3,000 US. I mean, they've been able to move ahead. It's time they outgrow this. They should now go to a stage where they build serious political institutions that help to counter these emerging conflicts during electioneering, because this happens once every 5 years.
Yes, every electoral process there has to be this.
There is some bit of violence, but for the 4 years, people have to live, people have to move on, people have to wake up and work, and a country has to go on. It can't. Mr. Habineza is saying one of the contenders should be accommodated so that there is no violence. Yet that is a contradiction in itself. In democracy. Usually it's winner take all. Then you accept defeat and stay on the other side and wait for the next process. Wait for the next chance.
So is it at that point where the problem lies? The models of democracy, is this where the problem lies? Because you ask a few people, they tell you, now that's a mature democracy. A country where, you know, the High Court, a judge, can overturn an election of a president and say you did not win, you are not duly elected. And others say, look at the competition and all that. But on the other end, some people say, no, 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 no. This direction we're going is actually not the right direction. How would you describe that?
Maturity is about the institutions that you put in place to govern a country. If the judiciary is strong enough not to be influenced by the executive, or the executive or the legislature is strong enough to contain two warring parties, well, that's where we should be heading. Those are the institutions we are talking about. Those institutions should be well developed, they should be strengthened, and they have achieved a lot in their respect, and in many countries around us. These institutions are there. All they need is a strengthening. So these are governing principles that you need to look into and strengthen. Otherwise, we shall remain in perpetual conflict.
All the time, as a cycle. JD, tell me about the elite, the young people, the business people. These are the people who are always seen as the silent ones. They do not actually take part, you know, on the ground to go and decide on a leader that they want, but they are active socially, on social media. They are the ones who will be there. And in the cases of Kenya and even Uganda and where we see, you know, destruction happening, this is when you see those, you know, in the business community coming out to hold press conferences and say, the politics is actually affecting our businesses. But most of the time you do not see them on the ground, you know, actively educating the masses concerning the right way to go. I want to hear from you. Why do you think this is the case, and how do we sort this out?
It has always been, and also I have to go back to all these things, where we are coming from, where we think that if I belong to this group, I will be able to access power and all that. If I'm a businessman, I have no role in a development or in an election, something like that, or in any efforts that would bring about change.
Yes.
And I've seen some good realizations in Rwanda where I see concerted effort being used. In fact, if you asked me today what sets Rwanda apart right now, I would say it's just these three words: unity of effort. So when you realize your part in bringing about change, then you play your role. And it's not an easy sort of thing to do.
Yes.
I am reminded of the 7 definitions of development attributed to the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. There's a part where it says development is also about improving lives of dignity. So that part of improving lives of dignity involves fighting. You sat and say, and you talk to your neighbor and say, if we fight, if these elections are bringing a country to a standstill, what are we in to gain? And then you use whatever platform you have, and you say, no, restrain from any form of violence, restrain from anything that would bring this country to a downfall. Let's stand up, build our country. Because at the end of the day, it is about the lives of the people. It is about the region that will be affected. Yeah.
And you talk about that, and the question that comes to mind is the issue of sovereignty, because most of the time when there is a post-election related violence or any sort of violence that is related to the politics, and anyone wants to come in to mediate, it's always been seen as an attack to our sovereignty. And I want to start from there, asking you, Dr. Habineza, because most of the time, in most of the countries in the region, when the opposition loses, they have always been seen to be running to the Western nations for support. In the case that we saw a few weeks ago when Honorable Raila Odinga left the country, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his team slammed him and said, look at him, he's going to look for people who are going to come to mediate. We are not open to a Nusu Mkate government, a power-sharing deal. I want to hear from you. why is this perception? Why is this the case, if it is indeed true? The opposition, this relation that we always see between opposition and foreign powers, why is it usually the case? When you talk to your peers and for yourself, if this is the case as well?
No, I think there was a misconception. I think Laila was not going to meet any mediators. He was just invited for a meeting at Chatham House just to discuss about issues of Kenya democracy, and was also meeting Kenyans. So there was nothing in that. I think the other side was just in hyper mood, and they were just charging what was not right. What did Laila do? I think he went to court. When he lost the elections, people first went on the streets, and then was this call for non-violence. He accepted and decided to go to court. He told people, please stop demonstrating, let's go to court. And he filed his case, and then the Supreme Court gave its ruling. What has happened in Uganda? Our friend, colleague in opposition, colleagues, like in the last elections, there were several, they went, or even before that, they went to court several times. Of course, they didn't start with demonstrations or with violence. They went to look for justice in the courts of laws. Even the last elections, they went to get justice in the courts of laws. So basically, I don't think that it's true that oppositions always go to the West. Actually, it's the governments which go to the West. Governments get money from the West, they get money from World Bank, from IMF, from European Union. So the governments are the one which are working more with the Westerners.
So you're trying to say the governments are hypocritical when they start hitting at opposition?
It's a reflection. They just try to reflect what they do. But it's not true that the opposition go to the West.
All right. Nerima, I'm told Nerima is online right about now. We tried to get hold of her via Skype. It was not possible. We've tried the phone lines. I'm hoping that the signal will be good, the sound signal. Nerima, if you can hear me, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. We're just talking about what's happening in the region, and focus right now is on Kenya. And it would be nice, as a person who's now live in Nairobi, to tell us, how can you describe what's going on right there for the people who are watching us right now?
Well, the situation at the moment is very tense. We're not quite sure what's going to happen on Thursday because, of course, as you know, opposition went to the Supreme Court and was announced. But we also just recently had independent director of police commissioner, Dr. Rosie Nakonde, resign.
Yes.
And one of the issues, as well as we had Chiloba also going on vacation and leaving on Wednesday. So there's a bit of a standoff, actually, and we had the National Day of Prayer yesterday because the population is very tense because we have President Uhuru Kenyatta calling for his supporters to get out and vote. Anyway, on Thursday, we organized Raila, and we have Raila telling his supporters that they should not go vote on Thursday. So we're not quite sure what's going to happen, even though he made an announcement that on Wednesday he's going to speak to his supporters, so everybody is wondering what he's going to say on this particular day.
Right. Nerima, talking of these anticipated 26th rerun or fresh elections, some people have been wondering whether this is actually a solution to whatever is going on in Kenya. In your own perspective, as a young person, as a person who's interested in politics, even from your organization, is this fresh election the solution to the problems facing Kenya right now?
The general election has actually made it extremely complicated because when we speak with other parties in our engagements, we have one side who are going to vote no matter what. They're supportive of President Uhuru and they're going to show their votes. And then we have another number of young people who are confused. They are afraid to go and vote because initially when they went to vote, they traveled to the villages to vote. Now they don't have their money. School has been interrupted. It's been closed down. In our university, it's been shut down because they were afraid that young people were involved in violent protests. So there's a sense of anger with the young people and they're not sure where to direct all that energy. So when we have these conversations about the rerun, some feel that perhaps the Supreme Court meeting and little what and most young people, they were studying done by the other country universities. It said that 50% of young people in Kenya at the moment are not tribal. We become tribal when we now start engaging with our parents and having those conversations with older people where they normally ask you when you are hanging out with your friends, what tribe are they? So it's an interesting dynamic because young people come for 51% of the population and they're 51% of the voting age. Actually, IBC said 19 million of the voters in Kenya at the moment are between the ages of 18 and 34 years old. So they have a large stake in this election. However, I do believe that there's going to be a smaller number or a drop in the number of youth who are going to participate in this election just because of the confusion that's involved.
Right. So before I let you go, Nerima, when you talk to your colleagues, young people, and of course those who you interact with, what do they say, regardless of what happens on 26th? I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me, Nerima? Nerima? All right. So our technicians are going to sort that out. Just stay with us, Nerima, because the conversation is still ongoing right now. I want to hear from you, retired Major. She speaks of the Supreme Court having made things even sort of worse in terms of, finding solutions to the problems of Kenya. I want to read from your mind, because part of the solution mechanisms was to accept that there was a problem in this electoral process that just ended. And so we want you to go back and do things afresh, but in conformity of the Constitution. Follow the rules. Is this the same thing that you read as well, where you sit? That judgment actually sort of threw Kenya where it is today?
Well, we earlier on we talked about democratic institutions. That happens to be one of the arms of a government, of a democratic system. That has been exercised, but yet it has not solved that problem, as we earlier saw. Unfortunately, for young democracies like Kenya's or other countries around, the political leadership is also appears to be failing its own people. We have a challenge, all of us. Until the two contenders come to realize that this is going to be at the detriment of the whole nation, then we have a serious problem. On one hand, you have the judiciary that has come in to redress something that appeared not to be right, yet it has created a spiral effect. So it's a quagmire now.
No, I think the justice system in Kenya should be praised or held for heroic actions they took.
You don't feel like they are part of the problem?
No. I think they actually solved many problems by taking the right decision. And I praise those judges, and we are very happy for what they did, because if they took a wrong decision or they made a wrong judgment, I think there would have been more conflicts now in Kenya. More people would have died. So they took the right judgment depending on what the evidence they had, and I think they solved so many problems. So what is happening now, I think those are minor issues, minor problems, which can easily be managed by the political actors. So I don't think that the Supreme Court of Kenya should be blamed for any wrongdoing. They did the right thing, and they should be praised, and all other Supreme Courts in Africa should emulate the Kenyan judiciary.
I will beg to differ with him.
Why?
You look, democratic institutions are not there to interfere with each other, to extend an arm and say, come and race, I'll show you that I'm more effective than you are.
So you feel the judiciary interfered with the executive?
The executive, and this is part of the resolutions of the Young Thinkers Convention, young men in Addis, we said these models of democracy imported to Africa are not working. If those who brought it to us are complaining about it themselves, how should we expect it to work for us? We said, as we are, and the unique challenges that we have, we said we need to give our leaders, the executive, we need to give them enough power to make pragmatic decisions for the common good.
Now let's take that point and transfer it and plant it in the Kenyan case. So what would you have expected?
For me, my ideal solution would be, let's revise things as they are. Look at our constitution, look at our separation of powers, the mode, how it is, what is working for us and what is working against us, and reform it. But right now, I think Kenya is faced with a serious issue that would probably, I pray it doesn't happen, lead to a sort of standstill if the judiciary interferes again.
No, the judiciary
and
don't interfere.
At the expense,
Yes.
at the expense of the taxpayers' money. Can you talk about the budget?
No,
Can you talk about the budget of these elections? Who is being affected?
The issue is not, as he said, the Major, democracy is messy. We cannot talk about the budget because the lives are more expensive than the budget.
But what is the lifeblood of a
But the Supreme
country?
Court intervened only through the failure, after the failure of the Electoral Commission. When there were problems with the Electoral Commission, which is an institution which is part of the executive, one of the contenders took the case to the Supreme Court, which is an independent institution. So they did their work. So they did not interfere. They were given a case to handle, and they took the right judgment. They made the right judgment according to the evidence they had. So the Electoral Commission is the one which had problems, and I think Electoral Commission or other electoral commissions should do their work as they are mandated by the Constitution or by the laws.
Right. So for you, you feel we should also look at issues of the budgets, who's being affected when such a decision is made at the expense of whatever it is.
Exactly, because our countries are not different from any, let's say, talk about a company. The lifeblood of every economy is the money, is the budget. When you take about, I think this is about, the budget of the Kenyan election right now is about 100 million Rwandan francs, if I got it right, okay? Because it's about 20 billion Kenyan shilling right now. Isn't this money, couldn't this money be fueled elsewhere?
Yes, but someone would argue and say, why not hold to account the people who are mandated to handle that money and then handle it wrongly, instead of saying that because of the sake of saving the budget, let us not stop this process or not stop this wrongdoing.
But why point fingers at the Electoral Commission? It is an Electoral Commission of the Kenyans, by the Kenyans. Why don't we have an executive power that goes to it, checks, the balances and say, what is wrong with this commission? Why can't it act properly? Instead of doing things that would put lives at risk.
As it is, the argument here is not answering the question you're putting across of how or when this conflict will be resolved.
And how.
How.
Yes.
That is the issue.
Let's talk about
on the table.
Yes.
But it's not an easy answer. You just heard from the lady the tension that is already in the air. It's explosive. So I don't think the answer is between two contenders now. But there is a conflict already. Mr. Habineza is already alluding to, of the Electoral Commission and so on. The judiciary intervened to resolve the Electoral Commission problem. It didn't solve the problem. So there is no black and white here. There is no right or wrong in this case. So it's a very difficult argument. You're not going to resolve this case by approaching the issue from that angle.
Right, but this is then when we need to be hearing from other regional neighbors of goodwill coming out. Eminent, people, for example, let's say former heads of states from the region, fellow heads of state within
Apparently
the region.
They can't intervene now until the elections are over.
Right, but then that's the question. That's the issue that some people argue and say, we are a reactive region. We are a reactive people. That let's wait until it becomes worse, then we can come and because
under which mechanism? That's the problem.
So you want to say that within the region there are no mechanisms of preventing, averting a political or possible political crisis within a neighboring country?
Well, we are in the case of Kenya. It's not yet at that precipice where you are now saying things are going the wrong. It's very difficult now. It's still, it's on the edge. We are not yet sure. You have mechanisms like responsibility to protect in the event human lives are going to be acts of crimes against humanity that may arise out of this tension, and that would be attributed to the ruling party, or even the opposition party can commit crimes against humanity. So that would require some form of intervention. Until that happens, you are likely not to do anything. Perhaps what the wisdom that would prevail is indeed some eminent figures to try and reach out to these gentlemen and say, please help the situation. It's getting out of hand. We are likely to lose many lives. And it's the issues of Kenya, as you put it, it's possibly beyond it will affect the region. The region, yes. Inevitably.
Yes. Right. Dr. Winners, should we sit and wait? Whatever we've seen already, isn't it enough for some head of state from the region of goodwill and says, you know what, this is what we need to do, my brother, or my, talk to this one or do this? Should we wait? To what level do you think?
I think officially countries cannot intervene in other countries' elections because that would be intervention and maybe against national sovereignty or sovereignty of those countries. So, but I think like fellow colleagues in the East African community, I think they have a duty to advise, maybe not officially, but through other mechanism or other means. I think, like I said, for me, my advice would be for the two key figures, that's President Uhuru and Mr. Laila, to see how the two can find an amicable solution, how they can solve this problem, and how they can share power. Because there is a conflict which has been there since 1960. For the last over 50, 60 years, since the time of independence, where the two key figures, Laila's father and Uhuru's father, were fighting for the independence of Kenya. And there has been, that described some group of people, that Laila's people, who feel that they have not been equally involved into the management of the country. So this is a long-time problem which has to be resolved. And they have a chance now to resolve this problem. Right. So the people, let's say like President Kagame, President Museveni, President Magufuli, they can find a way, can make a phone call and talk to each other, see how, we don't need to have Kofi Annan coming here or Ban Ki-moon coming here. But I think we have, the regional leaders have capacity. And they have the will. They have the will. And as he said, we are affected. We cannot just say that what happens in Kenya does not affect us. We are affected. And we shall be affected. Like our fuel comes from Kenya. So if there's a problem there, we'll have no fuel. So we will have no business at all to do. So basically, I think the solution does not lie in the democratic model they have, where the winner takes it all. That has failed. So they should find another mechanism which will help us to solve this problem.
Right. Perfect. JD,
yes.
Are we waiting for too long before we can say it's time to act? Like in the case of Rwanda, where the world watched and waited until it was too late. So have we learned lessons? And in the case of Kenya, we've seen Burundi, some people have lost their lives. For how long should people wait before we see action coming?
And it's all about our lives, and I want to say some of the great speeches I've ever heard is this, poets everyone keep on reciting, now we are the masters of our fate. Who is the master of the Kenyan fate if it's not the Kenyans? And I want to look at the percentage of the youth in Kenya, speak to them and say, it's about time we reacted, like now, and say, no violence, no coming to a standstill. If there are issues, we can solve them through peaceful means, through the participation of everyone, but no and no to violence, no to losing lives, no to, closing streets and businesses. People need to live. Times of Africa, when you read the Agenda 2063 of the AU, part of it says silencing guns. There's not a single bullet that should be,
Yeah, but these things, some people argue and say that they're just on paper, they're theory, but yet people are dying. Guns are still being fired. People are losing their lives at the expense, of the political situations in these different countries. And so because we're also running out of time, I want us to close on that. I mean, your parting words on the resolutions that we have on paper versus what we see on the ground. Are these things, is it time to act? Is it time to act differently? And when, we have the resolutions, we have the mechanisms, as like you quoted the one on when the rights of life and rights of people are being violated, a member state of the East African community has the right to come and tell you that, look, we need to work on this and stop it. Unfortunately, the circumstances dictate the way people are the way we are going to respond to situations. It will be dictated by how the situation evolves. Unfortunately, otherwise it will be unrealistic to tell you now that this is the right approach to the situation in Kenya. So it is difficult to say right now. It's difficult. Wow, Dr. Habineza, your closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Which way forward for Kenya? Which way forward for Uganda?
Sitting together, President Kenyatta, Mr. Odinga, sitting together, finding a solution. Peaceful means election is not the solution. Yes, we have East African Standby Brigade, we have all those, but they cannot intervene, as it says, unless there is an imminent danger, I mean, where the conflicts have already happened. So we don't want to reach there where we are going to send forces, East African forces, to intervene. We want them to find a solution before the election day. And I don't know what the solution is, but they should sit together and find a solution. Let the two camps find an amicable way of how they can work together. That is my prayer. Okay, perfect. Let me read a few tweets before we go. Is Nerima still on? Do we still have Nerima on the line? If we do have, it would be nice to get. All right, we seem to have lost her. Just very quickly, we have Olivier Munyabuhoro, who says, I completely disagree with Mr. Gakuba saying that the Supreme Court interfered in the crisis. What is his basis? This is what you say. Agi says, post-election dialogue, reconciliation and power sharing and electoral reforms, but peace should lead in everything to protect Kenyans from bloodbath. This is very interesting. Shuti Pacific says, so insightful discussion. And of course, Agi says, nationalism, patriotism must prevail. October 26th, living examples. Al Gore versus Bush, Hillary versus Trump. Teach Africa how democracy should look like. There's lot and lots of tweets coming through. Let's keep this conversation going. Which way forward for Kenya? Which way forward for Uganda? Which way forward for peaceful mechanisms of resolving electoral-related conflicts in the region? This is a question I want to give you sort of as an assignment if I was your lecturer. Let's talk about this. The hashtag to use is INFOCUS, and of course, we'll keep the conversation going. We'll see you again next time, same place. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye.